Hey guys, my name is John Park and welcome to another tutorial series. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you guys my general process for doing this painting. So let's get started. Alright, so typically I like to work with a fairly a more of a landscape format for this particular sketch. And generally my canvas size ranges around 3 to 4,000 pixels in length. But for today's demonstration, I'm going to start a little bit differently. I kind of want to establish my general light direction, so I'm going to do a quick black and white comp to kind of establish the overall lighting direction, my composition, and any major design or compositional elements. I'm going to try to block it in at this phase. This was something that I always wanted to try to show, because I think it's something that I do. It's something that I do in my normal workflow, and it's just more, secondhand nature. I kind of do this with color, but I wanted to show you guys more of a procedural effect, or order of doing this particular painting. So we're gonna start off with the black and white sketch, and at this phase, it's like starting any sketch. You want to just try to explore and see what kind of variety and what kind of different ideas you can come up with, and there's no commitment, so anything can go. I'm just thinking about just structurally, okay, if I'm gonna have this much white here or light, maybe it might be nice to carve out a larger section that might be a lot brighter. So I'm going to go ahead and just mask this part off right here and just kind of make this very, very graphic, very simple. I was heavily inspired by a lot of the pieces that another artist named Jamie Jones, who's a really good friend of mine, he did these wonderful pieces that just demonstrated kind of the world, but also just the lighting and how he handled it was just really inspiring. So this is kind of my attempt at doing a piece that's a tribute to the awesome work that he did. So hopefully this is half as good as what he did. But I think the challenge for me was converting a black and white sketch into color, or taking the elements of a black and white sketch and approaching color with it was actually a challenge that I was trying to solve. So, because typically if I'm doing a full color painting, I'll actually start off with the texture, or I'll start off with the photograph, something that already has color in it. But if you already had like a black and white sketch, the question is, what do you do? Where do you go from there? How do you plan things out accordingly, so that it can actually work. It can actually be a sketch that you can take into color without having to feel like you're gonna get stuck. That's always been kind of like a weird artist block of mine, as well as I'm sure many others have felt that way as well. Is taking a black and white sketch and then comfortably converting it into color. So. And even as you can see, at this phase, I'm just kind of loosely just blocking, just details or ideas, and seeing if that might be, if it might be worthwhile to keep. It's really liberating to work this way, because I feel that I find myself getting really precious or really or commit to an image too quickly. So it's nice to just think about the overall shot and the overall mood of the painting, as simple and straightforward as this black and white painting. And go ahead and just block in the figure here. I'm thinking it might be cool to have some sort of soldier or future soldier looking dude, kind of very similar to the Destiny character. Maybe he's kind of like a guard that's protecting the doorway here. So I'm gonna have like maybe like a weapon or a staff of some sort. And the clothing in Destiny is quite funky. I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but it's, you know, it's very like some weird combination of, like, you know, cyberpunk with old school style garment wear. It's pretty strange, but it's a nice hybrid to see something that's a bit more cultural, seeing like old architecture or ruins with tech. So that's the part that I really liked about this theme. So I have this dude standing here sketching maybe some light and some values, and as you guys can see, I'm only working with 3 major values here. It's light, medium, and dark. And with the light, medium, and dark, it allows me to, I guess, control the overall image. You know, and still having value range, so I can understand how much light and how much exposure is coming into the scene, and I'm able to put in the appropriate amount of details. But when I control my value range, you know, a lot of the white or a lot of the lighter values, I'm going to, you know, save for for my lit areas, and a lot of the darker values are going to be something that's going to be, you know, in the foreground or very, very dark, right? So it's a nice way to group your values, and I found that, you know, working in this early of a stage in this fashion really helped me to just kind of consolidate or have better control over my overall read of my image here. And you can see I'm actually not too precious, or, you know, not afraid to kind of redo or resketch the pose of the character here, and even figure out kind of like the general posture or areas, and even testing a little bit with kind of the lighting, like graphically. You know, maybe there's a certain amount of light that's actually hitting the figure here, so we can really get a nice sense of, you know, pop or key lighting there. And it's easy to overdo it with the highlights. So, you know, I'm just kind of laying it all in there at first, and then, you know, if I need to take any away, then it's easy for me to just kind of edit out. You know, just putting in or adding in more shadows here. Another thing is, you know, for those of you who are building a portfolio, or trying to, you know, put together some work for, you know, to apply to jobs and studios, I think it's very informative, and it's very helpful to have a lot of quick black and white studies like this, just to show that, you know, you have the ability to deliver, you know, multiple ideas, especially at this preliminary stage, that you're able to give and provide really quick ideas before committing to color. So, you know, I would say it's actually more effective and more helpful to show this part of the process than having, you know, 100 finished pieces or 20 finished pieces. You know, one of the most important things is making sure that you can showcase a little bit of range. This next phase, I added a layer here, and I'm gonna do a more of a refined sketch pass. Now, when I say refined, it just means that the ideas go from being a little bit, you know, more of like a blobby silhouette to a slightly more defined, you know, line drawing with design indications of elements and places, you know, placement of things. It doesn't have to be the best line drawing, but it has to be a step more informative than the black and white phase. So at this point, you know, adding in like armor or you know, refining the clothing a little bit to show a little bit more fabric and how the fabric folds. Um, you know, maybe the helmet, how it opens, or how it looks in general. It's at a good point where you can actually start to define some of those things. Maybe drawing a little face here, and so I'm not really set on like exactly what I want for this part. I know I want it to be like a sci-fi guard, but you know, I'm gonna keep it fairly loose. So if anything, if I change my mind, then I can easily go back and kind of alter those things. Maybe some sort of like, you know, more that Destiny mask. You know, I was heavily inspired and influenced by what Jamie Jones did. Just really awesome. Just kind of just the way he handled a lot of the materials, but more importantly, just kind of the design of the character looked really interesting. You know. I'm gonna sketch in the hands here. I know some of you guys might think like, you know, why draw it if you know you're gonna paint it? The value of actually drawing, guys, it helps you to kind of, you know, think about a lot of the internal elements and the internal shapes, because, you know, if without it, you know, you're kind of always guessing in the dark or shooting in the dark, and you don't want to ever get to the point where you're painting and you feel very indecisive about your decision making. I've actually ran into a lot of that, you know, when I was working on my own personal and also professional work. Is you don't want to ever deal with that, because it makes the process of drawing and painting very, very stressful, very frustrating, because, you know, it's not going to guarantee a successful design or an image. So, you know, I've always kind of leaned more towards, you know, just even doing a quick drawing for myself to kind of establish, you know, what am I going to paint? You know, what am I going to spend the next several hours or days illustrating? And this phase is so important because it helps you to kind of solidify those directions, right? Even to have just something jotted down, it becomes more of a specific roadmap for us to make core decisions as we start to develop, you know, the painting more. And, you know, it's a lot easier to edit and change things in a line drawing as opposed to a painting, you know. I remember having to do a lot of edits on a painting that I did, and there were so many changes that it actually took me a lot longer, and it would have been better if I just actually started it, you know, from a line drawing first and set on, you know, and had the design direction set at that time. So this is just something to kind of avoid, you know, running into those you know, those roadblocks. And a lot of my indecisiveness comes here, you know. I'm just kind of thinking like, oh, what if it had armor, or what if it had some sort of like cut line, or maybe the clothing can drape lower like this, or maybe it can kind of have more, you know, folds down here, you know, or maybe it can be longer, or maybe the foot can be straighter, or maybe it can be, you know, pulled back a little bit more. And so there's a lot of decisions that I'm making here that it will save me a lot more time, as opposed to me making decisions, you know, while I'm painting or changing the paint. Because, you know, if you're adding color, lighting, texture, and you have to change all those things, it can be so painful. So I'm going to use some of these textures here, or this photo texture, as more of like a, I guess like a inspiration, and also just kind of something that I want to implement into the design here. So I'm going to go ahead and add this in here in the corner, drop the opacity, and I'm actually going to use this to sketch, you know, my details. So I'm going to pull this below. Let's actually go ahead and sketch on top. I really liked kind of this Gothic architecture with these weird like statues that have like gargoyles and stuff on them. So I wanted to try to get a little bit of that flavor into the foreground of our painting here. I'm just using it as kind of like a really loose start here, but just to get that footprint in really gets me, a much more better start, as opposed to me kind of trying to guess my way towards everything. This will give me a lot more range and a lot more just kind of ability to edit and also add in things. Maybe some sort of like, I really like the little figure that's standing right here. We'll just add some like extended columns here, some weird detail. Maybe this thing is actually sitting on like some sort of platform, so I could possibly extend this right here. Maybe add like some like ornamental or decorative detail down here. It's sitting like on a base or something. Maybe something like weird, like lion griffin kind of creature. That's another thing I liked about Destiny, is that there's so many different mixtures of things that you can almost kind of bullshit some designs and it can actually work, because there's so many different things. Not saying that the world that they made is complete BS, but I think there's that many things, that many ingredients embedded into the actual world building. So it allows for you to actually play with more elements. So for me, I was like, oh, it might be cool to have some sort of like weird cathedral interior, and have this guy that's guarding this front door. Maybe there's like this dramatic light. So I'm gonna add a little bit more architectural details, like pillars or something like that over here. Sketch that in. I'm gonna get in my perspective guide here. And the only time I really bring in perspective is if there's architectural things, such as steps, pillars, or anything that's repeating and going back into space. It's actually really handy to have your perspective guide. You don't want to never want to eyeball this kind of stuff, because the moment you mess up, it will be so apparent and you can actually see your mistakes from like a mile away. So it's better to be safe than sorry. So it's moments like these that I'll actually bust out the perspective guide and just make sure that it's here, even though I'm kind of tracing or drawing the stairways kind of inaccurately, but it's funny. It's like I have the guides and I still draw the stairs slightly in a very sloppy manner. Don't do what I'm doing, which is like being a little bit sloppy with the stairs, but just to have that there, it's actually quite nice, Another thing that I'll be kind of going over is basically, how we're going to turn this line drawing or this black and white sketch, into color. So once we finish the line drawing here, we'll transition into a very, more of like a wash that will give us a nice tone, and then we'll start refining the actual painting as we go. I'm gonna mimic the same architectural pillar or the structure here. Kind of roughly estimating that it's going to be around here. I mean, it's not as accurate, but it feels like it would be something like this. And I'll drop down, and maybe I can have like some sort of like open. Have this figure here. Maybe the character's head. And just kind of repeat that same motif so that we can see it on the other side. I think one of the other hard things for me was having to paint something that was architectural, just because it gets very, very precise, or at least more precise than just doing like a landscape. And just having to figure out the general footprint for where everything laid in, and even this drawing here, it's not even that accurate, but I felt that I had to be a little bit more conscious or aware of where things sat in space, and also how the architecture would repeat itself in other areas. Because I can't just have one cool thing in the foreground or in the midground and not have it be anywhere else, because then it wouldn't feel comprehensive, and also it wouldn't look right. So just to even make sure that it repeats in other areas, because this is an interior, this is a building, I had to be extra sensitive with that kind of stuff, And anytime I felt lost, I had to kind of take a step back and quickly just look at just some European architecture, or just kind of refer to my research, or my reference board, just to make sure that I can spark up those ideas again. I think the hardest thing for me was like having to stop painting and just going back to the research board, or just some reference where I can be like, oh, okay, that's what that looks like, because I think the act of painting is so fun, but there's nothing more frustrating when you feel like you're painting something, and you spent like the past like 3 to 5 hours doing something, and you're like, oh shoot, this is all wrong. And it gets super discouraging. You're like, damn it, I just want to quit. Just like throw your Wacom tablet on the floor and just call it a day, man. I don't even want to deal with that kind of stuff, So I was like, dude, I'm done. I'm done kind of like, setting myself up for that kind of disappointment. So I've been actually actively trying to do a lot more reference researching, or even having it on my wallpaper, for example, or having it on just the side as just a reminder, like, hey, remember this cool architecture? This is what you're going for, because it just mentally prepares you, and it tells you like, hey man, this is we're still doing this, right? We're still doing this cathedral interior. By the way, there's buttresses, and there's all these like freaking panels and shit everywhere. So for me, it was just such a nice visual reminder to have on the side while you're painting. It also gives you a lot of ideas. So just some food for thought, guys. I mean, I know everyone works differently, and not everyone likes to work step by step, or have to do it one way or another. Some people just have something envisioned in their brain, and they're able to just draw it out like a printer. I know a lot of guys they're just built that way. Unfortunately for me, my brain is super mediocre, so I'm just going to heavily rely on reference. Okay, so this is kind of the sketch we had. This is a drawing we had right here, right? So at this point, if I crank it up, you can see, it's actually holding up. The darker values here, it's actually holding up fairly well. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of fill in as much as I can on the foreground details, and just more of the shape really. You know, I'm not trying to be not too much of a Nazi about like how perfect it is, but I just want to get in the general shape and the general you know, outline of it, or the outline of the silhouette, so that way when I refer back to it in color, I'm able to easily do that, and use kind of those shapes as a reminder, or even as a mask. You know, as I draw, I can just be like, oh cool, you know, I can just fill it in this way. So that's kind of the benefit of having this black and white sketch, is that you can actually use it purely as a mask. Go ahead and just fill this in. And even at this phase, guys, like, try to refrain yourself from zooming in too much. I think I caught myself wanting to just like zoom in a little bit more and just be like, oh, I just want to see that detail, but I know it's gonna do nothing for me. So I tried to stay further back, and it's the weirdest feeling, I mean, to be honest, because you're drawing so small and you're like, dude, I have a screen, why am I drawing so small? And I can zoom in and out. I have the navigator in Photoshop. Why are we punishing ourselves, you know? But this generally helps to kind of keep in mind the general and graphic read of things. So now we're gonna actually start adding some color here. I'm just thinking of this like nice bluish tone. Oh, something's wrong with this brush here. Let's go ahead and try to fix the color here. Still coming out weird in black and white. Let me switch over to a normal brush. Okay, it just might be that brush setting. Let's go to like just something with texture, and I'm just gonna give it a wash. Okay. This wash is basically, it's me saying the general painting is gonna be kind of bluish, so I'm just gonna give it a general wash, and you know, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just you just want to lay it down. There's no like, it's not really pretty. It's just a tone. You know, you're just toning the entire canvas. And let's go ahead and use this here. I'm just gonna tone a little bit more, fill it in, maybe add a little bit more saturation in some areas. You know, and you can kind of see the colors, the general base colors of what we're trying to put down. And even here, like, oh, let's go ahead and add a little bit more of this tone here, and maybe we can darken it down here. So it's really, really rough, like the one I'm doing here. It's a rough way of blocking out your tones, but we're not really painting. You're just kind of putting a big wash. No detail. It's just about the overall color. Okay. And I'm just feeling it out. You know, I'm just like, oh, maybe we can add blue. But what I do know is that the overall scene, I want it to be cooler. Okay. I don't want to add a darker value by the stairs here, because it'll totally F it up. Anything in shadow is going to be pretty blue. Anything in light is going to be kind of more of like a turquoisey or brighter tone. Let's see here. Maybe here in the foreground we can have a slightly warmer tone mixed in with a deeper blue. Something like that. And you can see how like rough I'm being with this block in. It's pretty muddy, you know. It's not the most prettiest way of painting, but it's like watercolor, you know. I'm like, turn it on and off, and you can kind of see the tones, you know, blending in. Alright, so let's go ahead and start blocking in a little bit of the character here. So I'm gonna actually, before we get that, go do that, let's just go ahead and clean up the silhouette here. I think that's another thing is, if you have something that's fairly defined, like a character or a foreground, you want those elements to kind of read very clearly before before it gets into before we start defining other things, we want to define the very, very obvious things. And let's go ahead and add a little bit more, maybe some green here, just to kind of tone it. And again, a lot of my colors, I'm just kind of putting down a blue and just trying to find, colors that would kind of be within that bluish range, So purple and greens tend to be cooler. My warm, I'm gonna try to savor that for my character. In the lighting here, it's gonna be very neutral. So meaning it's gonna be fairly bright white. So it's gonna appear more neutral, and the shadows are gonna appear to be a lot more cooler. Let's go ahead and just clean up some edges here. And you can see immediately, like, the moment we start quote unquote cleaning up edges or just cleaning up the painting, the big blobby mess that we have here, it starts to kind of come together, It's like the weirdest thing. Like, your brain just starts to understand, like, oh, it's not a loose, like, muddy thing anymore. There's actually some cohesiveness to it. Or there's something to it where I can understand the image. It's not like a big like mess. All right, let's just go ahead and block the character in here. And I'm actually going to treat this as more like a silhouette, but start thinking about like silhouettes with graphic color. And if you guys are concerned about lighting, like, the easiest way to go about this is just think about the local color or the local material color, and just block it in without having to really worry about like shadows or anything like that, because you can always add that stuff in. Alright, and maybe like we can paint the helmet maybe a brighter tone or something, kind of the whole like Destiny style. I'm just testing out, like, maybe I can add in like little red marks or maybe some red tones here. But again, like, just having the freedom to, like, play with the color range or tone it's really nice. So this is kind of like what's really nice about working in this fashion and having a line drawing, because now a lot of the information is still represented on top. We just have to reveal it once we start adding in all the colors. Now I went ahead and I just kind of darkened the helmet just a little bit. I just want to test out and see the general light direction, and because it is a bright helmet, or the local color is white, I just want to see how much darker I can go without having it be too bright. So at this phase, like, you can start to add in a little bit of shadow and stuff like that, or more darker graphic elements here, but a general rule of thumb is, go ahead and block everything that you have very simplistically, and then you can add in the lighting fairly easily. The other struggle that I had when I was doing this piece was just having a really good figure drawing foundation, and just making sure that the figure and the stance was really good. Because even though we can paint this, and we can try to render it or light it as best as we can, if the figure and if the actual if the figure and the actual an anatomy looks off, then everything just kind of falls apart, you know. So that was one thing that still bugged me while I was doing this painting. I was like, man, I wish I could have figured out a little bit more of the anatomy in, you know, in the figure here, or just like kind of understand how to bend the arm or the torso a little bit so that I wasn't struggling so much. I felt like I was actually struggling quite a bit. Let's go ahead and like test the red tones here. However, this painting was, I guess the one thing that was really relaxing was the fact that I was able to just make some really nice color decisions without having to feel rushed, or without having to feel like I didn't know where I was going, because we had the line drawing. And so the line drawing, it just gave me that reassurance, like, hey, you know, by the way, this is what we're doing and this is where we're going to go with this piece. So it definitely gave me the sense of confidence that, like, okay, even if I'm lost with color, at least with design, I know exactly where we're going with this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just lasso out this other pillar here, just so I can block out the basic local color. You know, just keep it really simple and just do a quick wash here. And I don't want to just paint bucket it or anything. I still want a little bit of the painterly brushstrokes and the marks and stuff like that to keep it loose but yet informative is something that I'm trying to strive for. And I'm just adding some darker tones here. Just start indicating some of the architectural details that are on there. Let's go ahead and fill in the shoes or the feet. And maybe even like a more of a red chest plate. I feel that like a lot of times this is kind of what makes the painting process really slow. It's just being indecisive with like the small things. Because again, you know, it's like I didn't think this far, even like when I was planning out the sketch. I didn't think about like, oh, the suit's going to be red, or it's going to have a certain tone, or, you know, the highlight of the suit when it gets brighter is going to be this bright, you know. I'm just turning on and off and see how it looks. But these are a lot of the things that, like, as we kind of continue to paint, you know, we have to start making those decisions. We're faced with those choices, you know. And not to make it seem like it's like a big complicated thing, but you know, it definitely consumes or adds a lot to the painting, to the actual painting time. I know you know, a lot of people ask me like, you know, oh, how do you get paintings and stuff done so quickly? A lot of times it's like I'll be able to get it done quickly because I'll have a very strong thought or a direction on where I'm going with a certain piece. Other times when I'm stuck, I'm really stuck for a long time, and I have no idea what to do, or I have no idea how to resolve it immediately. So it'll take me quite a bit of time to kind of go through the steps of like trying things out, and just constant error, you know, trial and error. As you see, as I turn it off, it starts to kind of like, you know, come together a little bit. But yeah, these are the things that I really like to, you know, explore these phases. Is just like putting down color and turning off the drawing layer, and just seeing how everything kind of looks, you know. I think I think for me, the goal for this was to show you guys that, you know, painting doesn't have to be this like daunting task. It can still be an enjoyable and, you know, fun process. um, and you know, you can actually still paint and not feel flustered. You know, there's ways to problem solve. And you know, that was kind of the goal for me, was like I wanted to do something that, um, you know, that I would have wanted to do on my own free time. That's not work related, but also, you know, that gives me kind of the wiggle room to kind of experiment, but within these boundaries. And the boundaries that, you know, we set up here is a line drawing, because it's kind of a safety net. You know, it's kind of like swimming. You know, it's like you're learning how to swim for the first time, but if the water level is like 3 feet or 5 feet, you know, you're likely to not drown. Um, but if you're swimming in the ocean and the water level is like 20, 30 feet and you get scared, then, you know, you're probably going to get into some trouble, you know? And I know it's a weird analogy, but I feel like with painting, it can fall into that, where if you don't know where you're going, if you don't have a basic footprint, then you can find yourself getting really lost really quickly, or you'll kind of you'll end up in like a hole that you can't dig yourself out of. And to me, that's always been kind of like the fear, you know, because a lot of the way I work, is so heavily, you know, based on using photo textures, or you know, using like a rough 3D block out. And so having to work in this fashion it was very refreshing, but also just reassuring, and letting me know like, hey, you know, it's okay that even if I mess up, I still have the opportunity to make these adjustments, because I have a good base, or a good underlay. You know, I'm not going to change the lighting. I've already established the lighting. You know, and the actual design, the general design direction, I have a good 50 to 70% just kind of blocked out. So the part that I'm actually going to explore is really just the colors, and just the smaller things, you know, the enjoyable things. So I'm actually kind of finessing the helmet a little bit. I wasn't too like crazy about the upper piece, so it's kind of being indecisive. I'm like, well, maybe it can have this, or maybe I can simplify it. Maybe it can have much more of like a simpler gesture. And also just kind of testing out like, well, if there's a certain amount of light hitting the actual figure here, maybe I can add just a little bit more light. Just even adding a little bit more light to the garment there. Gives it just a little bit more form. It's a relatively simple a simple lighting direction, you know, like there's not much complexity to this. It's just, you know, the character is kind of being rimlit, so I'm just kind of hinting at a little bit of the form. But I definitely want to just kind of introduce a little bit of light and see how it looks. And a lot of times, like, if you guys are stuck at phases like this, you know, feel free to pop over to another side. You know, like, notice how the character is unfinished. So I went ahead and I just kind of started dabbling at the foreground, you know, this gargoyle like statue here. Just because, like, my brain, I just couldn't wrap my head around you know, how to make the figure work. So for this actual figure here, or this foreground, I definitely wanted it to be darker and have some hints of some sort of fill light or reflected light to show a little bit of the form. So I'm just going to reveal just a little bit of where that's going to take place. And I'm thinking that it might be cool to have it more lit from the top, because it's not receiving direct light. I'm thinking that it's going to have a little bit of that like ambient kind of lighting scenario. And if that's the case, then I can kind of light the figure and all the elements around it just more subtly, you know. And it doesn't have to be like this epic, overly rendered epic thing. It can just be just more indicated. And you guys, you'll hear me, I'll mention it again, that, you know, painting at a distance will allow you to kind of understand how you're going about the entire painting. I guess another thing, you know, because I don't want to just talk through the entire, you know, step-by-step process, because I'm sure you guys understand what I'm doing here, but another thing that I wanted to share with you guys is the basic principle of lighting. Notice the lighting scenario here. It's very graphic, meaning all the light is hitting the stairway, and there's a lot of reflected light bouncing up into or behind the character, right? So lighting can be treated very graphically, and you can actually create compositions just through lighting, right? So if you look at the way I'm actually treating the composition of lighting here, it's very selective, right? The brightest source is actually the stairway, and everything else is relatively darker, right? So our eye is not going to flood around to the dark corners per se, but it's mainly going to stay in the area of high contrast, right? So that's something that I just want to share and have you guys think about when you guys are doing a keyframe or an environment or even a character, you know, for that matter. You know, have fun with the lighting. Try to provide different graphic lighting scenarios. You know, maybe the lighting is more of like a stripe of light, or maybe it's more dappled, you know, there's like little pockets of light, or maybe, just maybe, it's a, you know, big swatch of light, just kind of like what I have, right? So that kind of stuff, that kind of setup will give you quite a bit of range and also wiggle room for you to be able to get a lot more variety and a lot more interest in your lighting. But, you know, I just wanted to share that portion with you. I'm sure some of you guys already understand the principle of lighting, but to me, like, when I discovered it, it was like learning how to, I felt like I learned how to draw again for the first time, you know? You're like, holy shit, I know how to light things, and this is how you can do it. But really, it's just a realization that, you know, lighting actually works. It actually works that way, and there's quite a bit of, you know, stuff that you can do. So here, as you notice, I just dropped in the photo back on top, and I'm just going to use it for texture. And I just kind of want a little bit of that grittiness on top of that darker area. And I'm just going to go ahead and just use that to kind of give it a little bit more range in texture and also just overall tone. So you notice we turned off the line drawing here, and you can just see, like, by adding in a little bit of that texture just kind of helps give it more range. You know, it was reading a little flat, and when I say range, it's just really a lot of the subtle textures that we're getting here. And I'm gonna go ahead and use the same photo here, and possibly even stretch it and put it into our painting. And I'm gonna go ahead and use soft light. This also gives us quite a bit of color range as well, color and texture range. I'm gonna use it here, and it kind of pulls out a lot of that nice green that I mentioned earlier. And I'm actually using the smudge brush here, so I'm just kind of smudging and moving the textures around. If you guys don't know where the smudge brush is, it's right underneath the paint bucket tool. The smudge tool is great for getting a lot of movement, and you're kind of like moving the image or the paint around. Let's go ahead and just kind of like reveal a little bit of the texture here. And basically what I did is I created a mask, and I'm just kind of painting, and I'm painting white to kind of reveal it. This way it gives me kind of the fidelity and control to be able to paint in or paint out that texture at any given point. So using masks are quite helpful for anyone who doesn't know or haven't used it. I highly encourage it. It's a great tool. Alright, so another thing that I'm doing here, guys, I'm just using the smudge brush. So you'll notice I'm constantly going back from the smudge to the paintbrush here, and I'm just trying to use as many different ways to kind of smoothen out the texture here that I use. And the texture was only really good for the color. Again, I still wanted to keep it fairly brighter graphically, because I'm saying that there's quite a bit of bounce light happening there. That way, you know, we can kind of still get that nice effect. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer just so I can actually clean up some of the edges here. Again, if we were doing this a lot more cleaner, it would have been best to keep that the foreground statue figure on a separate layer so that we can turn it on and off. But since we're just kind of painting this as we go, I'm just gonna go ahead and just paint away at the edges here just to clean it up. Gonna darken this area a little bit here, and I'm gonna go ahead and just bring in a little bit of a highlight so we can get a little bit more light, like light catching that edge. Alright, cool. Let's go ahead and start defining a little bit more of this little architecture. Give it more of a defined edge. So even if your guys' paintings are kind of what I would call mushy, you know, at this phase is fairly mushy, you know, it's not to worry, because I think this is kind of where we're starting to define those edges so that we can make it a lot more clear. So you'll see me just kind of smoothing out or adding darker areas here. But anytime I want to spell something out, I'm going to define it with a hard edge or with a fairly defined, you know, painting or some sort of descriptive area or description. So whether there's an arch, then I'm going to make sure that the arch is fairly clear and legible, or whether it's a you know, like a door, then I want to make sure that door is clear and legible. So there's just a couple of things that, you know, I want to make sure that that, you know, if we're going to spell something out, you know, make sure you make it fairly clear, even if it's loose. Because if you squint your eyes, which is partially the reason why I'm painting so far, is that the bottom half is still very mushy. The only thing that's really defined here is actually the amount of light. So I know for a fact that there's quite a bit of bright light that's hitting the stairway, but I definitely want to start defining some of the things here. Maybe just some of the more pillars that are in the back, just really quickly indicated, and maybe some of the elements around it, just to show repetition. But I don't want to over render it. I don't want to render it as much or put as much energy into it to the same level as my character, because that's going to take away from the quality, you know? That's going to take away from our actual character. Let's go ahead and lasso this out. I'm going to lasso this out so that we can get kind of a nice crisp stairway top here. And we're just going to use a regular round brush. Or we can use something textural if we want to. Maybe something textural, just to kind of block in or tone it in a little bit. And you'll see me kind of going back and forth from a texture brush, just so I can kind of block in the tops. I'm going to invert the selection so I can now paint the other side of the stairway. I don't want to recreate that selection, so I inverted it by pressing Control I, and that's going to inverse the selection there. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint the brighter side of the stairway here. And all I'm saying is that the stairway it's receiving light, but it's going to hit the front face of the stairway, not the top, but mainly the front. That's going to be the most direct direction that it's coming from. So, and I just want to make sure I give it a little bit of variety of, you know, where it's brightest versus where it's kind of a little bit darker, because, you know, it's all angle of incidence. So it's not just because something's bright doesn't mean that it's going to be completely evenly bright. We want to make sure that it has some sort of what you would call a gradation of light. You know, it's kind of like when you look at a reflection, you know, like from the sun or something, and it's hitting a shiny object, or if it's hitting like the surface of your car or water, you'll notice that based on your angle of where you're looking or standing, that source will be brighter, right? So we want to kind of emulate that same kind of feel even in our painting, right? So if one area is bright, we don't want to just blow it out and make it all white. We want to give one area a little bit more hierarchy of light. I know this stuff might be a little if it's throwing anyone off, or if it's confusing to you guys, you know, and you want a little bit more explanation, just feel free to email me, and I'll try my best to you know, email or respond back to you guys to your questions. And my email is jparked. It's brainstorm jparked at gmail.com, or you can reach me at my personal Gmail, which is jpforjohnpark@gmail.com. But yeah, so from here I'm just kind of refining a little bit of the background here. Again, I don't want to over render it, just kind of indicate just some colors, maybe just some details going through. I'm fairly happy with the general tone. So I'm just like, from here it's just adding on just a little bit more clarity to, like, oh, what is the ground? Maybe the ground has a checkerboard like design. So we're going to go ahead and add that in. Just kind of indicate something like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and compress this here. And I think we're at a good point where, you know, we can work directly on top, and I have the line drawing here available. Anytime we kind of need that aid, I can turn it on. But I feel that, you know, this is at a good point where, you know, once you got the painting up to a certain level, you can very quickly just start painting on the flat, on the copy merged layer, kind of what I'm painting on right now. And so that kind of forces you to really just commit to the actual painting, and also just make the adjustments as you need to very quickly and very easily. Add a little bit more light here on the shoulder. It was looking a little dull, mainly because the background is it's a little bit more muted, and also the area where I'm popping out the highlight there, what's juxtaposed next to it is a pretty fairly darker value there. So I want to make sure that we have something to kind of like make or give it a better clearance there. Just gonna go ahead and start refining, and maybe even adding just a little bit of detail, maybe some holes or some sort of design detail here. I like the cleanliness of it, but maybe I'm thinking it might be cool to have some sort of like techie opening or something like that. It's like wishful thinking on my part, you know. So it's where I'm gonna constantly go back and try to resolve this part. And you'll see, like, I'm being quite conscious of like the smaller areas, trying to clean up some areas and refine it, but I don't want to refine it too much because it's gonna kill it and it's gonna become very stiff. So I just want to refine the areas where it just needs it. Just get a little bit more edge control there. Maybe just a bit more of an edge on the little respirator kind of mask that this dude is wearing. Maybe the oxygen, you know, is something that they can't breathe here, or need some sort of special kind of breathing apparatus because of the air quality. Definitely gonna go ahead and just kind of refine the helmet a little bit here. And this part is what I would consider the most boring part of the painting for someone, you know, for someone watching. For me, it's really exciting because then I'm starting to refine it a little bit more. But you know, if you guys need to take a break, feel free to just take a break, or if you need to skip through it, go ahead. But there's not a lot of action here, you know, and that's there's a point in your painting where it's going to slow down, and when it slows down, you'll find that a lot of a lot of the image making or the choices are kind of narrowed down by like one or two strokes or one or two details. So you'll notice like I'm just fixing the hand a little bit and painting out. It's so minute that, you know, someone who's watching, if you're kind of turning your head around, you probably won't know what's happening. You're like, oh, did he add a finger? Did he add a thumb? Like, what's going on here? You know? But for me, like, this part is important because it's the little tiny cadences in the painting that I really enjoy. That for me, it's a problem for me to solve. And for anyone who cares about the small things, you know, they'll look at your painting and they can appreciate it that much more. They can see it and say, oh wow, you know, this person actually really thought about all the small little areas. All right, so still kind of, you know, trying to explore some of these different head variations. I should have probably done a separate side drawing and explore different designs. And this is exactly kind of the thing that I wanted to avoid, was kind of fussing around and doing different design iterations on top of a painting, because this is exactly where, you know, it eats up so much of your time, and also you find yourself just getting into this like weird mode of like constantly changing and being indecisive, and that's something I just wanted to reiterate on, is that, you know, anytime you guys you guys want to really decide on a direction, it's almost better, you know, it's better to just kind of do a quick sketch on the side, or just take a moment on a piece of paper or something, really figure out exactly what you like before you commit to it. Because as you can see here, I'm making the classic mistake of not quite liking what I have, or not feeling confident, so I'm like messing with it and I'm adding things, and it's not necessarily good. You know, adding more things doesn't necessarily make it good. It just means I'm just adding more detail, you know. So yeah, just some food for thought, guys, because I found that like this was the part that was frustrating me the most in my entire painting process, was right here, because I didn't know where I was going. And this is exactly what the drawing was for. You know, it's exactly why we had the sketch to begin with, to basically inform us and let us know, like, hey, you know, do not derail from the main objective here, or the main point of the image. You know, try to stay on track. And I probably should have stayed closer to the sketch. But you know, it's something that, you know, I know a lot of us make this mistake, or make this decision, and you know, I think personally, for me, I find it to be a lot more effective to just have a direction in mind, so that your focus and all your energy can be spent on, you know, really good colors, really good mood, really good feeling of storytelling through lighting, as opposed to just constantly messing with the design. And there's moments where you can mess and, you know, alter the design, but I think that should happen at the design phase. And clearly this is not, you know, this is not the time for me to mess with the design here, because we've already established a sketch in the beginning. Such a rookie mistake on my part. So you'll see, like, I'm turning it off and I'm like, oh, the original looks better. And I turn it back on, I'm like, yeah, let's delete everything. Right? Classic mistake. So And again, I'm messing with it again. I'm like, oh, what if the back head had a kind of like a weird helmet thing? It's like, nope. Let's just stick with what we have. It's good. It's not bad. It's so easy because, you know, I think something about like Photoshop, um, it is so easy to alter your drawing or your painting that, you know, we feel like, oh, I can go and I can change it at any given point. um, I personally had a lot of I guess a lot of battles with that, because when I draw traditionally, when I put a mark down or when I put a design down on paper, it's locked. It's locked for good, and it's probably a good thing. It means that there's nothing I can do to kind of go back in time and change it. If I wanted to change it, I have to redraw it again. But I think there's something very important about that step, is that literally you are forced to commit to it and to stick with your decisions from the beginning. It's something that I'm still trying to practice, you know, more so. And you know, if any of you guys have that issue or have had that problem, you know, let this demo be a reminder of, you know, just committing to your designs or committing to your decisions and just stick with it. You know, there's nothing really good that comes from being indecisive. You know, just all you get is a 50-hour painting or a 50-day painting, and you might not even be happy with your final result. So yeah, lesson learned, you know. I'm like, damn it, why couldn't I, like, why can't I see, you know, sometimes I just want like an image on the side or something that tells me, that gives me all the answers, you know, like a little cheat sheet that says like, hey, this is exactly what your design's going to be, you're not going to make any other changes, and this is exactly what the color is going to be too, so just paint it up. But that's, I guess that's always been like the struggle or the balance between being an illustrator versus a, you know, a conceptual designer, is that we actually have to wear both hats simultaneously. At least when you're an illustrator and if you're painting a still life or you're plein air painting, um, you know, all you have to do is really analyze and just kind of understand the colors around you, and you know, it's all about mixing and composing the image. But here we have to simultaneously mix, compose, and design the image all at once. You know, there's so many things that we're orchestrating here, and that can be a very daunting task. And even for me, I'm even like, oh man, I got to do this part and I got to figure out this part again. I'm like, geez, so much stuff going on, you know. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the point I really wanted to share with you guys, because it was something that I always find myself doing. You know, whether it's related to personal work or professional work, is constantly wavering back and forth on my decision making. Okay, so enough of me blabbing around and properly giving you guys a narrative and the step by step of what's going on here. I've now added kind of the proper reflected light on the statues here, or that object, and now I'm just kind of going about like cleaning things up here. You'll see that I'm bouncing around and I'm trying to darken up the bottom wall next to our character's feet, because his feet's getting completely lost. So what I need to do, or what I'm trying to make an effort to do, is I want to bring a little bit more contrast there, so that our character isn't just floating and isn't just sitting there. You know, there's a certain amount of light that's going to be trailing up onto the character, and we want to introduce that light, you know, possibly by the feet. You know, there's because the stairs have so much light information that you can almost imagine or almost justify that, hey, you know, the leg or the feet probably has just as much light. So let's go ahead and add the same light source. Again, kind of back onto the to the foreground here. I'm just adding in a little bit of refinement on the edge there. I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of tone these little notches down a little bit. Another general good rule of thumb too, guys, is like anything that's out of your focal point, you know, feel free, or you know, be sure to use larger brush strokes, because it's going to suggest that it's out of focus. You know, you don't want to cause too much attention to the areas that are not supposed to be in focus. So if something's clearly not in the focal point, you want to make sure that it's loosely handled, or it's handled with a much more broader range of detail. There's probably some things I could have done to really simplify and also even add much more simpler brush strokes, even on the gargoyle in the foreground there. It feels just as tight or just as refined as our main character. So you know, that's just a side note that I've noticed after even getting to this point. I'm like, probably should have had it a little bit more simplified. I'm adding much more brighter highlights here just to really pop it out from the back. Simplifying the mouthpiece here. Just kind of blend out these little notches here. And you know, sometimes if something doesn't look quite right, you know, feel free to pull back the image just to make sure that you're not losing your readability. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, because you know, even I tend to kind of zone in on a detail, and it might be unnecessary because you probably wouldn't really see that from a distance. So there's no point in me finessing all the things in this foreground, you know, and I probably wouldn't see a lot of the specularity or all those little details because we're so far away, or because it's out of focus, or because the light source is darker. You know, these are all decisions that could have easily been made, or decisions that could have been avoided just by simply working from a distance. I mean, there's some things that I'm pulling out just to see if I can make it look interesting, but I think anything beyond this point, it will become a very distracting image. think I eventually start, as I start putting things in, I'm gonna go back on top and just start dialing down the amount of detail that's being exposed. And the reason why I lit up the beak on this little gargoyle is because I, I would ideally think that, oh, it might be better to have it darker so it really pops out, but there's a certain amount of contrast that I wanted to pop out. One, the background, it would have to be darker than the background if I made it darker. And two, since the garment on my character is darker, I didn't want these two dark shapes to be next to each other, if that makes sense, guys. Reason being is that I wanted a sense of contrast even by comparison, right? So now when you look at the beak and you look at the backside of our character's clothing there, it's dark, and the value or the contrast of the actual gargoyle in the front, the beak is brighter, so that now we can kind of make a distinction just by value, like what's being separated, and that was something that I was actually trying to finesse. Go ahead and adjust the feet. I just felt like there was something static, but just trying it out. Not sure if this is if this is the best choice or the right choice to make, but just trying to see if that's worthwhile. And also, I noticed the character's a little stunted, so I'm gonna go ahead and actually copy merge and stretch up his torso a little bit to make him taller. He's looking a little bit short. So I mean, like, one of the other things of fixing your painting is, as you're painting, a lot of times I always find that the proportions always seem a little funny. So you'll actually see me do quite a bit of editing at this phase. It's tricky because I think mentally I'm so focused on color, composition, and just trying to get the overall image to read, that a lot of basics such as design and proportion kind of slip away from me at times. So it's good to kind of go back and just kind of readdress those issues and to see and make sure that it's on point. So a lot of times, like, that stuff, if it slips, it can actually be a huge detriment, to the actual or to the overall artwork. Thinking like maybe some sort of like cool backpack just to kind of balance out the overall design. I felt that the design, I mean, the character design is fairly simple, and like I mentioned before, it's a complete design tribute to Destiny, and the stuff that if anyone has seen like Jamie Jones's artwork, I loved just kind of his adaptation to the character, and just kind of the way the character was kind of I guess kind of visually represented. There seemed to be a lot of story and a lot of visual just interest. Just go ahead and just continue finessing and plant the ground of the foot here. It's kind of funky because, like, the guy, as I painted him, like he's like directly right on top of that plane, and in perspective, I mean, this is actually, it's getting close to the horizon line, so it's like half in between. So I'm kind of like, do I paint him so that his foot is flat, or do I paint it so that there's a little bit of perspective? So this was a little tricky for me to kind of just like deal with that part. You know, and I'm sure I've mentioned it, you know, a few times before, but um, I find that, you know, not every painting is, not every decision that's made in painting is always going to be a home run. And I feel like, I think 80 to 90% of the time I'm just kind of like, what am I doing? You know, like where am I going with this painting? And you know, I have so much, there's so much self-doubt when I'm developing these illustrated concepts, just because what you had in your head was so much better, right? And it's always going to be better what you have in your head. But it's when you get down to, you know, the actual act of drawing and painting out your ideas that you have in your head. I feel like that is the single most hardest but most important thing. And I feel like as I do more of these exercises, I'm getting a little bit closer to what I envision. Yeah, it's a weird struggle, because I always feel like, man, it looks so much cooler in my head, you know? And as I'm drawing it out, I'm like, this does not look like anything to, you know, related to what I was even remotely imagining. And that is a pain in the ass. I'm like, come on, let me try to just give me, you know, throw me a bone here, you know? Just give me a chance to actually, you know, get even close to, you know, what I think is cool. And I think a lot of that the kind of like the envisioning your ideas and putting it down onto paper, it's kind of like, to me it feels like speaking, you know, not to get too, you know, abstract about with my analogies, but I feel like it's kind of like you want to tell or convey your point, or say something, and you want to say it in the most, you know, I guess most well articulated way, or using like, you know, sending or saying your message in a very, very smooth fashion, but you just find yourself blabbering words, right? And I blabber a lot, and I'm sure you guys have already heard me blabber a lot of BS, but to say something like fluently and also fluidly, like make yourself sound, you know, really like professional and smooth, like a smooth talker, like that takes a tremendous amount of skill, you know? And I relate it back to even drawing and painting. I'm like, man, I thought this would have been easy, just to learn the basics, and, you know, I thought I'd be able to just draw things out really smoothly or talk really smoothly. But I'm realizing, I'm like, no, I gotta really practice this stuff. I gotta learn how to communicate, or I gotta learn how to, you know, deliver my lines better, you know? And sometimes I'm always thinking, like, you know, like, what would my concepts be like if I was actually talking? If this is all translated in like words, you know, what would it sound like? It'd probably sound like, you know, a real professional would probably sound like, "Hi, how's it going? Nice to meet your acquaintance." But with my concept turning into words, I probably sound like, "Hey, how's it going, man? It's cool. The sun is out. Nice to meet you." You know, it's like, it's probably all over the place, and I probably sound like ridiculous, you know. And I don't know. It's just one of those things where the more you do it, the more you find out like what you could have done better. And so I'm just flicking back and forth from the image here. So, we can just kind of see the comparison of the two. You can just kind of see like how I move the foot. It gives it more of a grounded feel. And I'm not sure if that's the best. I kind of liked how the foot was angled. Just felt like he was kind of stepping up to the plate. But anyways, I don't know. That's just kind of like my 2 cents about, just kind of creating like the image, the perfect image in your head. Also, I want to talk a little bit about, as I'm painting, I don't want to bore you guys with narrating every single stroke, but I do want to talk a little bit about inspiration and how to keep motivated. I think it's something that we all struggle with and we all deal with on a daily basis. I know everyone watching is an artist or aspiring to become a concept artist. I find that inspiration can come from many forms, and you hear it time to time, and you hear it from many other people saying, you got to go out to the world and just do your thing, man, or go do something different and come back to it, or step away from your artwork and come back to it. All those things apply. Every single one of those things. But I think the single most fundamental or most like profound thing that I found for myself was like, who do I want to be like? If you can transform into any artist of any time period, like, who do you want to be like, and why do you want to aspire to be as good as that artist or that person? And just kind of start looking at like, try to envision or imagine like how they live their life, or what do they do to really kind of influence their artwork. And I feel like through some sort of weird psychological like translation, like you start to kind of understand, and you get excited about other processes or other ways of like getting into a different mode of working or thinking. My favorite is, as I've beaten his name into your guys' heads, is Craig Mullins. And I think the reason why I want to aspire to become like someone like him is that I love the way he looks at art completely differently than most artists that I see. And it's not necessarily the technicality of it, even though he's technically just an amazing artist, but I think it's the amount of freedom and exploration. And that, to me, I didn't realize how much he pushes himself on that, and that to me is inspiring, and that to me, kind of gets my motivation going. Where I think to myself, like, am I really pushing the boundaries of my own work? Am I looking at artwork differently? Am I trying other things differently? Whether it's a technical thing or whether it's a conceptual thing. Am I allowing myself to kind of explore and wander off and be inspired by something that I've never done? I know it sounds mega hippie, and it sounds really for some of you that listen, you guys might be like, what in the hell is he talking about? But it's to me, it was such a profound like thing that I discovered. I'm like, shit, man, like I really just have to learn to kind of to let go and to kind of not be so bent up on trying to do certain things a certain way all the time, and learn how to have fun again. Like I remember one of my friends telling me, like, he mentioned how when we were younger, as kids, we weren't so caught up in the rules of making artwork. We just did what we felt. We did what we felt based on what we had imagined, and how we can carry that imagination, you know, and help inspire just our drawings. Even though the drawings were shit, you know, they were really crappy, but it almost didn't matter because it inspired us to do more. It inspired us to do some really cool, innovative things. And I want to get back to that place. I want to get back to that place mentally, and just kind of see how that can be transferred, or that can kind of come through the artwork, you know. I know a lot of us, when we watch these educational videos, and as I'm actually sharing with you guys my process, you know, there's a takeaway, and the takeaway is like, well, what brush am I using? How am I setting up my lighting scenario? And how do I go about my painting and my composition? But if there's anything that I can, if there's anything that I can really kind of shed some light on, is you know, be open to trying different things, and just try it out. You know, don't be afraid of messing up, and don't be afraid of doing things outside of your own comfort zone, which is the hardest thing to do, by the way, just because we all have comfort zones, and we all want to do a certain thing a certain way. But I think that kind of holds us back to a degree. And some of you guys might disagree, and that's completely fine. But for me, it held me back, and I think that's something that I came to realize. I was like, man, this is I need to do something different, you know. So I've, you know, going back to this painting, I've never really done a painting like this before. I think I had very similar types of paintings, you know, with my previous cowboy or Assassin's Creed inspired fan art that I've done. But in terms of like a composition, both compositionally but also both narratively and lighting wise, I don't think I've ever really given myself the actual thought of actually doing something like this, and to do it well. And I think that was a challenge in itself, but it's also inspiring because I'm finding out more, you know, how to do more paintings like this. So if you guys were to ask me to do another bluish painting with dramatic lighting, I think I can go about it in a different way and do it better, you know. And so I don't know how much of that actually translated and was understandable. See, again, like as I told you guys, I'm like mumbling. Like I in my mind I think I'm like saying something profound, but I'm probably just saying painting is good. Use different colors. Try to paint with your eyes closed. But you know what I'm saying is, like, you know, that's kind of my way of finding inspiration and doing things to do things differently, to do things out of your norm is inspiring. And you know, if any of you guys feel stuck, if any of you guys feel like, you know, like you haven't grown, it's maybe because you've kind of been doing the same type of artwork, or you've been painting and drawing the same way. And I know I've been doing it for years, and I'm always looking at all these other artists on ArtStation, you know, Facebook, all these other platforms, and I'm like, damn, these guys are getting so damn good. What's in their water, man? Because I want some of that, you know. But I just think that they have a different perspective, and they're trying things that I've probably never tried before, and I think that's what's bringing their artistic level up, you know. Anyhow, as I'm continuing, and I'll just continue chiming in there, but as I'm continuing this painting, I'm balancing out just kind of my general lights and darks here, and I really want to establish just some edges, just some clarity, and I'm actually working a little bit closer to the foreground here with the gargoyle, and I'm adding in a little bit more light, and the light is is something that I'm gonna use to my advantage, so that I can pull highlights. I can pull a little bit more of that form up against that dark background. Only because it was getting a little bit lost, and if I had that horn dark, then I feel like everything would be kind of bland and boring. So just wanted to pop or kick a little bit of light there, just to kind of guide our eye into something. I'm also thinking, like, this structure is like strangely, it's right now it's just standing on nothingness. So I'm trying to plot or figure out, the platform that it's actually sitting on. I think in my mind, again, mentally, I had it all set. I'm like, oh man, I know exactly what I'm gonna do here, or I know exactly how it's gonna look in my own head. But when it comes to the painting, I'm like, I have no effing idea what to put here, man. I am lost. I'm like confused as hell. So I think for the longest time, just to avoid that area, you'll see me I'm just kind of like, oh, let me just put some highlights here, and I'll come to it later. And that's me being a total pansy. You'll see me jumping around time to time, only because I have no freaking idea what to do there, man. And it's completely normal. If you guys feel like some part of your painting is not working, work on a different section, work on a different area of your concept, just so that you can kind of come back to it with a fresh perspective, or mentally you're a little bit more refreshed, and you have a different take on it. All right, guys. So we're about an hour and 41 minutes in, and or an hour and 40 to 45 minutes in, and it's still all live, and we're there's moments in the artwork where it was initially really fast, and now we're actually slowing down a little bit to kind of figure out all the little subtle details, and this part can be incredibly boring to watch. So I don't blame you guys if you guys want to put the fast forward button. But I feel like, to me, this is probably the hardest part, but also the most enjoyable, because it's kind of like you're getting your the final touch-ups, the things that really kind of define how good this artwork is going to end up being. And I'm not saying that this artwork is gonna be good per se, but I gotta make it good, and it all lies at this point, making sure that there's the subtlety of lighting, the forms, the folds, the contrast, and just making sure that everything kind of has a good place, to sit. And it's incredibly difficult. It's difficult for me to know if I'm making the right decision, but I definitely need to resolve these areas, because for me it kind of makes or breaks my paintings by my own standards. Let's get the tip of that, the staff here. And the staff, I don't necessarily want to point out too much. I kind of wanted to have a little bit, so that it's not too in our faces. So I'm just gonna dial down the background so we see just the staff here. And it's, I guess, knowing how to simplify. If there's areas that are repeating an object, like this staff was obviously was kind of contouring or following the gesture of the background. So because it can get confusing with all the lines, it's better to simplify the background so that the staff really shows up. So anytime you guys are painting and you want to make something a bit more clear, just constantly think about juxtaposition, meaning what is this object next to. So if you have someone in a red suit, right, and you really want to pop out that red suit, you want to make sure that the background isn't red, or if it's, and you want to make sure it doesn't have any similarities to that temperature, because then it's going to just get completely lost. Okay. And notice, like, I am putting the most amount of effort on this character, because he's the most important subject matter on this piece. I want the viewer to really pay attention to and look at this character as much much and as long as possible. That's predominantly the reason why I'm spending so much time on the character itself. Another thing too is, if I can talk a little bit about like brush strokes and brush economy, because I'm still learning that stuff too, and I'm by no means am I a master of it, or have I successfully done it well, but I find that like a lot of my mark making is actually very much determined by, first, how fast I'm painting. So if I'm painting really fast, a lot of my strokes come out really, really ugly, only because I'm literally rushing through the painting, But if I paint slow, then it starts to come out a little bit more methodical, a bit more planned out. But the other thing is, when you paint with a certain amount of brush economy, I think the thing that helps is thinking about the shape of the brush, or the shape of the mark that you're making. It didn't really occur to me for a while, and I've honestly never have thought about brush strokes or the marks that you make as a shape, but the shapes have to look sexy, right? If the shapes don't look sexy, then your brush economy isn't going to look sexy. And I didn't understand that for a while. And so if you guys ever get a chance, and I've seen some really, really amazing artists where I just kind of see them redoing a stroke over and over again, and I'm just like, what the hell? You've already painted that, man. Just move on. But I think what I missed was that they're trying to capture a really beautiful mark, a really beautiful gesture in the brushstroke. And that didn't occur to me until, recently. I was like, oh man, they're really trying to kind of capture a nice gestural line or a gestural mark. And so, being the nerd that I am, I've been scribbling on my little pad here of recycled paper, because I have tons of recycled paper next to me. And I would get my brush pen or my pencil, and on the broad side, I would try to make marks or strokes. And now, I'm not just like mindlessly making marks or strokes, but I'm trying to make it so that it has thick and thin weights. Sometimes I'll practice and just try to see if I can, draw some sort of like clothing, or some sort of folds, with and keeping in mind kind of the economy of my lines. And that's actually been a very helpful thing, and I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to get more fluent with it. And I feel like brushstrokes is like, if we were to use analogies again, I feel like it's like learning how to pronounce the words very, very clearly, and being very articulate, like being able to enunciate the words. Sorry. So some people, if they say like hello, but if you have someone who's speaking English for the first time, and I'm making fun of my own people, Asians, they go, oh, hello, oh, how are you? That means their English is pretty broken, right? I mean, my mom, she's been living here for 40, 50 plus years, and her English is still broken. Doesn't make sense to me, but in the world of painting, I'm seeing that her way of I guess saying the word clearly is still not perfected, right? And that's the same thing goes with brushstrokes. I feel like if your brushstrokes is still not clear and if it's not perfected, then it's gonna come off really, really muddy or a little bit skewed or a little bit unclear, right? And it's kind of the way I see, you know, how brushstrokes are represented. When you see a really beautiful brushstroke, it's seeing someone speak a word very, very clearly, really, really nicely, you know? And I'm sure we all know those people that when they say something or when they talk, you're just like, damn, they can talk. They can talk really, really well, man. Damn it, I should have paid attention in speech class or you know, I should have really spent more time reading or something. But there's just some people that have a really a keen ability to enunciate and say the words very clearly, and I feel that brushstrokes, in my own quirky analogy, represent that. You know, if you can just do a really sexy brushstroke, right? You're saying that you can do and communicate an idea, an expression, very, very cleanly, very, very, you know, in a very appealing way. So hopefully, you know, the next time you guys start doing concept art or painting, you're gonna start pronouncing and practicing saying words. I know I am. I'm like, oh man, I gotta learn how to talk better. Otherwise, I'm gonna sound like a fobby Asian guy who grew up in the United States, which makes zero sense, right? But I find that to be I just found that to be really interesting. I was like, man, why are some brushstrokes really, really, you know, why are they so appealing? Like, why does my eye, you know, go to that area, and why am I so fixated on it, and why am I falling in love with the image because of the brushstroke? It's because it's just so well said, you know. It's like I find like French being such a beautiful language, and when you have someone speaking French to you, it just sounds really cool, you know. It just has that like appealing, smooth, suave kind of you know, feeling to the language, and I feel like that in itself is like an art style, you know. They just know how to really talk and kind of get people to listen, and the language itself is so appealing. You're just like, oh man, that sounds badass. All right. Anyhow, we are now focusing on just some final details in the cast shadow area. Now I'm like kind of working in a little bit of bounce light on the legs. You know, things got, you know, I'm pushing and pulling the forms. And honestly, like, I think if I knew exactly where I was going with the image in terms of, you know, the subtle lighting, I could have been a lot more economical with the image here. So, you know, I do apologize for the back and forth, but I want to show you guys kind of the honest, you know, painting side of what I'm presenting, because, you know, I don't want to you know, fake it to you guys and be like, yeah, you know, every painting I do is awesome, and you know, it's effortless, you know, be awesome, or else you can't paint or be in this industry. And that's not the case. You know, I mess up all the time, and there's a lot of insecurity that comes with it, and you know, I think it's just another form of constantly trying to push to be better. And so here you're seeing me just kind of work in a little bit of the background here, and just kind of dial in on some of the details here in the back. Constantly going back and forth on the character here, and also the background. So I'm just looking at the folds. I'm like, this angle here, it looks too flat. Let me just try to gesture it out a little bit more, you know. just get in a little bit of the opening back here. And you know what's funny too is if another thing about painting and painting subject matter really is, if you guys are gonna get, if you want to get really good at something, like let's say vehicles, characters, robots, or drawing like dragons for the fantasy art people, I would say if you want to get really good at it, try to get obsessed with it. Meaning, draw it more than once, draw it more than twice. Paint it more than 100 times, because the more you do it, the more you learn from your experiences, and you just get more and more better at how to execute a good painting or a good drawing or a good design for that matter. And I think the more I've been painting or trying to paint characters with being in robes, I don't know why, is that I'm starting to find kind of garments and folds to be such an interesting but heart-wrenching task. I'm like, oh man, I could have drawn that. I could have drawn the folds much better. Why didn't I draw it better this time? Or thought to myself, like, man, I should have done more figure drawing. I feel like all my figures are so stiff. And it's just such a good insight, because it tells me, like, okay, if I want to do this more and I want to do it successfully, I gotta just do more of it, and I gotta think more about it. I can't just be a one-hit wonder. Just hope for a grand slam and just try to just do it once and do it really well. It's like that doesn't happen. I think some of the greatest artists have literally drawn the same subject matter more than 100, even 1,000 times over and over again. That's why they have such a economical way of dealing with figures or landscapes or anything like that. Because they've done it so many times. And I remember recalling Richard Schmid. He would do these amazing landscapes, and he draws trees like a boss. If you guys don't know who Richard Schmid is, be sure to look him up. It's Schmid is SCHMID, and Richard is his first name. Check out his book, it's Alla Prima. He has other books out as well. But I was watching one of his demos, and he had it was such a badass demo, like where he painted a tree, and that tree was just flawlessly painted. And he made a remark. He said, I can get away with painting trees really quickly and sloppily only because I've painted so many trees, and I know exactly how to fix them. I know exactly how to make them better, or how to invent them. And that to me was like an eye-opener. I was like, holy shit, the Grandmaster has spoken. He's like saying, like, I don't need to punch, because I can punch you back with the flick of my finger, because I know exactly where it's gonna hurt. It's like it was the most gangster saying I've ever heard. I was like, holy crap, that was so awesome. And it got me thinking about my artwork. I was like, you know what? If I want to be as badass as that means I just have to draw and paint 1,000 guys in robes, 1,000 guys in some sort of like sci-fi armor, or do 1,000 guys in like some sort of like Assassin's Creed looking armor, if I want to be able to make really, really fast and amazing decisions like the way he made when he was painting that tree. And so it's just it goes back to that saying, like, we like practice, practicing something makes it perfect, but it also makes it permanent. Like when you do something so much, it gets ingrained into your brain that you can always refer back to it like it's nothing. And that to me was just like was such a big eye-opener. And I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys because I personally find doing one painting is really exciting, but doing the second, third, fourth, all the way down to like the 50th painting, to be as equally exciting, if not more, just because you're taking all of that knowledge that you've obtained, and you're just more badass. You have so much experience. You're able to do that much better, and you're able to, execute it on a much more higher level, than you could have the first time around, right? And I'm sure a lot of you guys know, like, pro athletes like Michael Jordan, and professional skateboarders like Tony Hawk and Shaun White for snowboarding. And when you see them perform, they make shit look so easy. It's like unfair, like I'm like, man, I wish I can skate like that. Or I'm like, man, I wish I can play basketball like that. And the reason why I feel like they're able to achieve such an effortless looking way of playing or doing what they do is because they've done it so much that it's become ingrained into their body, and just the way they move, the way they're able to play the game, or the way they're able to react to things, and when I look at amazing artists, I can just tell them, like, all right, these guys, they didn't just come out of their like out of the womb and at like 0 days old, they're like, I can just paint awesome. It's like, no, man, it has to have come from immense amount of hours and mileage and just crazy training and just ingraining that process. So yeah, go do some more paintings. After this video, I hope it inspires you guys to kind of go out and just draw and paint. And it doesn't matter how shitty it looks, because you're not going to just stop at that painting. Do more, do way more paintings. And as you guys see here in the back, I'm just color picking and painting in some like weird, like spherical looking, tanks here. These balls in the back, something weird. I mean, it's like in the background here, like there's not a very set design. I'm just kind of putting in, suggestive details, because it's not the main purpose of the image. And so I'm just trying to just populate it and put something slightly or remotely interesting. But anyhow, that's what I found very, very interesting. And it was just kind of, it came to me. I was like, man, no wonder like these amazing artists, and especially the masters, like Sargent and all these other guys that I've been name dropping this entire demo, have such an efficient way of just drawing and painting and doing things and making it look super easy. It's like the most depressing thing. I'm like, oh man, I always tell myself, like, I'm never gonna get there, but if you think about it, I'm like, you know what, I can get there, because they got there and they just did 1,000 paintings, and I've only done, or they've done like 10,000 paintings, and I've maybe only done like a couple hundred to maybe 1,000. But it just means that I got to do much more to get there, and that's all it takes. It just takes if you're willing to sit down and nerd out on this stuff, and I'm sure we all are nerds here, and we're all art fans. Why not? Why can't we do that? There's no rhyme or reason to not be able to do that. We just have to put in the hours, put in the time. And a lot of it's like, I like to relate it back to like, for any of you who play RPGs, is that, someone like Craig Mullins, he's like a level 99 wizard. He's killed so many orcs and bosses and things like that. And starting out, I think as a student, I think we all start out as level 1 grunts. Like, we just go and we're slaughtering guinea pigs and little lizards, and if we try to attempt to do something that's way above our level, then we're gonna get destroyed. We're gonna instantly die, right? And it's gonna be hard to recover from that because we're gonna get hurt so bad. Um, really dorky analogy, but I found that to be so true because I was like, you know what? That just means I have to work more in order to achieve that level 99 godlike level. That status of like I can paint and draw anything. I can tackle any design assignment. I can tackle any type of subject matter, any type of lighting. I just need to do it. I need that mileage, and that mileage is literally going to come from. It's going to come from basically leveling up, spending the time, putting in the hours, putting in the effort, and understanding more, and understanding your weaknesses, understanding your strengths, and it's just like leveling up. For anyone who plays RPG, it's kind of like you just become stronger and better after every single battle, after every single painting. Basically, you're gonna become stronger and better. And so I know while I'm doing this painting, I'm like, you know what? I have leveled up. Even if it's not much of a level, it's far more than what it was before. And if anyone asked me like, hey, John, can you do a moonlit interior painting? I'll be like, hell yeah, give me that shit. I'll do it. It will look a little bit more amazing than I'm doing what I'm doing right now, but I'll do it. And I think that's something that we have to remind ourselves is we all need to kind of give ourselves a leverage of saying, you know what, we're not born masters, but we can become masters. Boom, knowledge bomb. It's like one of the things like one of my friends told me. He's like, dude, when you say stuff like that, you should just go up to a crowd and just stand up, bring out your Wacom pen and just drop it on the floor. Just be like, boom, you've just been knowledge bombed. I was like, oh geez, that's like the nerdiest thing, but I'm gonna totally do it. All right, so anyways, let's get back to this painting here. So as you guys heard me babbling and basically didn't learn anything, you can kind of see that I'm making a lot of just little design decisions or more painting decisions back here, and I'm actually putting a little bit of texture using the pattern stamp tool, just to kind of vary it up here. Now these are textures that I've collected and made for myself. I highly recommend making your own, and there's going to be a segment here at the end of the video just showing you guys the process to make them. I'd like to encourage you guys to make them because these textures to me are more personal for personal use, and and I think you guys will find a lot of joy making your own textures. It's because it's not like making a brush. It's just more like it's like making your own. It's just finding it's like finding your own like photo library, and you'll find a lot of joy in it. So definitely check that out. So what I like to do is I like to overlay a little bit of texture here and actually use it to kind of help influence some of the colors, and get a little bit more variety here. And you'll see I'm actually simplifying a little bit of the upper part because I don't want the audience, or I don't want anyone to look at the top left corner because that's not really important. So I'm just kind of simplifying as much as I can here. And I'm gonna go back and just add a little bit of speck detail, highlight detail on the farthest left part of the this little detail, this little frame detail here. So I'm gonna try to add that in as much or as best as I can. And I'm not trying to break the value structure that I laid down. I want to use exactly what's there. The moment I add something darker or something even more brighter than that, it starts to break away the original value that I intended for, and it can actually make the image quite funky, really hard to read. So just keep that in mind, that when you set a value structure, when you set colors in the very beginning, you generally want to try to see and try to stick with those colors as much as you can, um, because they will do wonders for you. You know, it will help maintain the integrity of the value range in the actual work from the original thumbnail. Just kind of darkening things down. I'm using a very soft kind of a brush with a little bit of tooth, but I have it on overlay. And overlay is really great when you want to darken things down but still retain color. A lot of people I know use, you know, pure black, or they'll put on multiply. Both work, but just know that when you put on multiply, it goes to black really quickly. When you put it on overlay, depending on the value of the color you pick and the hue, it affects it. It affects it based on the type of surface you're painting on. Meaning, if you're painting on a light surface and you're picking a dark value, it will calculate that and it'll actually blend and mix the colors in a really interesting fashion. So what I'm doing here is I'm also like just adding in a little bit of the God rays to kind of give it that dramatic fashion. And I'm using a texture brush here as well. God rays, you know, tend to look better when when it's not so soft brush, and it instantly gives it that weird cheesy digital look. So I'm giving a little bit of tooth, and I'm just kind of smudging these edges. You can kind of see how it's lagging here, but I'm gonna use a little bit of a smudge brush just to kind of help break the edges a little bit, because, you know, I don't want the lights to the lines to be too strong. Smudge more details on the top portion. It's just a fun way to kind of subtly indicate, you know, certain amount of like brush strokes. You know, it's like, especially if it's at a lighter value like this. Also putting on a mask here so you can actually erase away some of the stuff so that it's not so strong, because there's a lot of detail in the back that I'm like, well, kind of lost a lot of that. But and you guys will see I'm constantly copying, merging the layers here, because I don't want to fuss with too much of the layers underneath. I just want to mainly focus on what the image is, and I'm using an overlay here. I'm using a soft brush this time, but again, just kind of using this to kind of make gradations. I'm just testing things out, like, you know, maybe I can add a bit more color dodge here, or more light. Making selections here so I can, you know, pop a little bit more light here. And I'm using the select color range here, and it actually selects a certain range of color. This is a really helpful tool if anyone wants to get, you know, some nice selections here without having to manually use the lasso tool or the wand tool. You know, this is a great way to kind of select an area and just kind of like hit certain areas and get this specularity. It gets a little bit alias-ish, meaning like it will kind of break a little bit of the edges, but, you know, just do it with, you know, just little bits at a time, and it should be okay. All right, now we are basically kind of wrapping up. I'm just doing some final touches here. I'm like simplifying my edges, simplifying the background, just because there's a lot of brush strokes. There's a lot of like random mistakes that I probably didn't realize that I made. So I'm using color range here again, and I'm selecting the background here just so I can pop out this area a little bit. And I'm gonna use normal mode. It's gonna hint in a little bit of that color, that yellow color, just to really pop out that edge of the gargoyle here, because it got a little dark, and it's kind of nice to just pop it out just so that it doesn't get too it doesn't compete, you know. I definitely want that silhouette to read, especially for our character, you know. So we're about 5 minutes away from finishing up here, and so this is like the final touches. Now, for you guys who have kind of a problem like finishing things up, or you know, polishing painting, like this, at this point, you know, try to look at your artwork and don't necessarily get too precious with it, meaning like, you know, if you need to add something, you know, go ahead and try to add it, you know. And this is the reason why I'm constantly duplicating my layers here, is because I'm adding it and I'm just seeing if it looks good, you know, if it's going to help the image read better, and I'm constantly trying to find ways to improve it, just that added 5%, and it really goes a long way. It's like the weirdest thing. It's like, it's really putting the right amount of salt and pepper in your food, right? For the first, literally for the first 2 hours, I felt like, you know, we were doing a bland painting, a bland food. You know, it doesn't have much taste. It has all the ingredients, but it just doesn't have the right amount of like emphasis. Like, it's just boom, you know. And adding the right amount of change in this at this phase makes such a huge difference, especially for me as the artist who's going through this process of painting. You know, like, I want to make sure that it tastes just right, that it looks just right. So, you know, a lot of the stuff you're seeing here, I'm just trying to make those adjustments, trying to ensure that, you know, all the colors look okay, the edges look okay, the readability of the image looks okay, and just trying to make sure that it's all nice and pretty, you know. And so this is the 10%, you know, or the last 5% of the image, where it's really about these little tiny bits and these little tiny moments. And again, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to really to watch this video and actually supporting it, and it really means a lot. I want to definitely do more of these types of videos for the future. Let me know if you guys have any questions at all. I'll try my best to get back to any one of you guys who email me. There's a lot of emails that come in regarding questions about the demo, but questions about portfolio, just let me know. My email is jpforjohnpark@gmail.com. That's the one email for a lot of the for my direct contact. If you guys want to visit or contact me at Brainstorm School, it's brainstormjparked@gmail.com. So either one of those work. But yeah, feel free to hit me up. And yeah, we're just finishing up here and just kind of see how this thing looks. But yeah, that's pretty much it, you know. I'm really happy with the way this thing turned out. I think there's a lot of things I would have probably changed, you know, the second time around, but I think I feel like I leveled up, you know. I feel like I leveled up, and I'm ready to do another painting, and I think I'll be happy, you know, with the second painting from the things I learned here. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this painting, this tutorial, And be sure to check out the next segment on how to create pattern stamps. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a good day, guys. Thanks. Hey guys, so I just want to show you guys kind of the process of creating textures when I'm using the pattern stamp tool. So what the pattern stamp tool is, basically it's underneath the clone stamp, and all you do is you hold it down, and it will actually come with very default settings here. And you'll notice I'll actually choose a brush here, and as you paint, you will see that it emulates, or it paints literally what's in this sampling right here. And now there's different modes. You can actually align the textures so that whatever you paint, it will basically be revealing basically what the textures are doing. Or you can put it on impressionist mode, and it'll sample the colors, and it'll give you kind of this craziness, right? So this is something that I use, and what I like to do is I always like to use my own textures. I'm going to bring up a little set here so you guys can see. And I like to import textures that I found, either things online that's ambiguous enough, or things that I've made or I've scanned in. And I like using various textures for various reasons, because it gives you so much variety of shapes, color, and just grittiness. So this is something that I love to have you guys just try out. And I like to just create a bunch of textures in here and just kind of bring them in. And some of it can be really low res, it can be really high res. It doesn't really matter. It's just as long as the texture is cool and it works for you. And a lot of times, if you have things like text here, you can always kind of blend it out. But what's great about this is that I can now import this into my pattern stamp mode. So the way you do that is you go into the layer, you go into edit, and you go define pattern. It's going to ask you to name the pattern. You can call it like green, and let's go ahead and do another one. Define pattern, brown, and let's do another one right here. Define pattern, and we'll call this one blue. Okay, so we have 3 different distinct patterns that we've kind of imported here. And I'm going to go to my pattern stamp here, and you'll notice that there's 3 basically thumbnails that popped up here, and I'm literally painting with this. Now if you take it out of impressionist mode and you paint, notice how I'm painting literally the pattern that I imported. This is just a lazy man's tool of importing patterns without having to drag it into your scene, but it's great to paint just to get a little bit of color and just some variety, especially when you're drawing and you're painting, as you've seen in my previous demos, where we have an object here or a character of some sort, and you want to import the pattern. A great way to kind of get some color, some variety, and just instant textures. So this is a great little tool that I've been utilizing in all the demos. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the rest of the demo. Thanks.